Welcome to the Being Human podcast. Delighted to welcome Sally McCutchion to the show. Welcome.
Morning.
So, Sally, you've had a stellar career at Flight Centre UK, which is a big travel agency operator in the UK. You had a stellar career there, and over 2 years, you grew the turnover. You contributed to growing the turnover from 50 to 70 million pounds, and you developed an authentic leadership and peer-to-peer learning program there. You left in 2014. You've gone on to develop yourself in many ways, and which includes becoming one of only 2 certified Holacracy coaches in the UK, and you're part of the Creative Consciousness Coaching Academy, which brings insights to individuals and organisations seeking to move towards Teal, which perhaps we can get onto for those who don't know that. So Holacracy, Teal, and off the back of a stellar career in industry. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay. And also a former podcaster yourself, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure soon to be podcaster again, but yeah, for now, former podcaster. Yeah.
Right. So I've had people ask me about Holacracy before and what it's all about, and I'm guessing there are going to be people in our audience who are very interested in that. So should we start there? What we mean by Holacracy and get into it a little bit, and then perhaps how you came to it.
Yeah. So Holacracy is a method of self-management. So self-management being a sort of a management methodology, if you like, and there are various ways that you can practice self-management within your organisation, and Holacracy is one of those ways. Holacracy itself, for me, is one of the most sort of mature and one of the most developed off-the-shelf systems of self-management. A lot of the other methodologies are either not as well developed, in my view, or have been sort of developed bespoke, sort of specific within an organisation. So an organisation will find their own method of self-management. So Holacracy is a real off-the-shelf method of self-management. It involves creating roles instead of having job titles. It involves having 2 specific meeting processes called the tactical and governance meeting, that are specifically designed to support the practice of self-management and get things done within the organisation. And there's a real I'm sure your listeners will have read, there's so much online about Holacracy. There are the lovers and the haters. So there's a lot of mixed reports that, Holacracy is too rigid. There's reports, particularly in the States, of people leaving companies when their companies have adopted Holacracy. So there's a lot of mixed reports, but for me, it's sort of the go-to starting point for self-management, because it provides a sort of a real toolkit of new ways of doing things when you want to shift away from the traditional hierarchical structure.
Okay. And so you mentioned there, you talked about the shift from job titles to roles, and you talked about these specific types of meetings. What are the big chunky things that companies have to take on to move in this direction that are going to feel very different for companies?
Well, the biggest, chunkiest thing is nothing to do with the actual Holacracy processes. It's the mindset shift. Like, that by far is the biggest, chunkiest, potentially most challenging thing that a company needs to know about. Not necessarily when it's shifting to self-management, to Holacracy in general, but to self-management as a practice, because it involves a real change in how things are done within a business and how things are done within businesses. By and large, I think the landscape is really shifting quite a lot at the moment, but by and large, the way things are done within an organisation has been the same or very similar for decades. So that's the biggest thing, I think, is the mindset shift.
And what does that look like?
It looks like having a mirror held up to how you think and behave within your business, and for you to consider, or for you to be invited to become more consciously aware of your own thought processes and behaviours, and how they impact the team, how they're impacting yourself, and what do you want to do about that? Like, there's nothing necessarily enforced in terms of forcing you to change, but it's a mirror, and it's an invitation to doing things differently.
Right. And so is that the essence of the mindset shift? It's becoming reflective, or is it something like that?
Yeah, the mindset shift. I mean, certainly there's an invitation to just become much more consciously aware of yourself. And that is probably the biggest barrier, because that can be very challenging and very difficult. But, to get into more of the specifics, one of the things that Holacracy invites you to do is to let go of anything that doesn't concern your specific roles. Now, for someone that likes to be a part of everything that's going on, or, in other words, meddle in loads of different things, that can be extremely challenging. And Holacracy doesn't necessarily say you can't do that, that you can't be involved in other things. But it certainly invites you not to be, and to really focus in on the purpose of your specific roles that you hold within that business, and let go of anything else. So I'm sure for a lot of people, myself included, like for a lot of your listeners, that would be like, oh, what do you mean? Like that in itself, for a number of people, particularly the types of people that often end up being leaders within an organization, that can be extremely challenging.
Right. And have you had first-hand experience of this?
Of practicing self-management?
Well, and of this shift, or of this?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I worked in a Holacracy organisation called Evolving Organisation for about a year. That was in my early days, and that was my sort of training ground really for Holacracy. So I was energizing roles and living the meeting processes and working with others that were doing the same, and observing what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and also interacting with others that were experiencing it for the first time, and seeing what challenges it raised within them as well. And then since then, I mean,
what was that like? So what was that like that you? And so first of all, what the hell? What does energizing role mean? That's going to sound a bit woo woo, I think, to some people.
Energizing role is basically having a role. So where you have a job title in a business, instead of it being a job title, you're going to have a sort of a portfolio of roles. And energizing the role is just a term that we use to describe how you engage and act in those roles. So basically, it's how you do your job.
Okay. And how's that different from like a job description then?
Well, it's not different in terms of what you're going to be doing. What's different is when you've got a portfolio of roles, the first thing that Holacracy says is that a role must have either a really clearly defined purpose, or it must have an accountability, at least one accountability. And an accountability is an ongoing task that another role can expect you to do. So amongst your portfolio of roles, you've got a really clearly defined either purpose that lets you really understand why this role exists, and or you've got a set of accountability. So it's really clearly defined as to what is expected of you. Now, one of the main differences within a Holacracy, if you compare that to a job title, job titles and job descriptions might be reviewed I don't know, once every 6 months, or probably more like once every year, and then put into a drawer or cupboard, and they're probably outdated within a week. but it's probably not something that you refer to on a daily basis to help you do the best in your job. It's more like a sort of a theoretical activity that that happens once in a while within the organization. Whereas with these job roles, they form part of the live governance records of your organization. And what that means is that in a governance meeting, they can be changed. They might be changed on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. They might not be changed for 6 months, but the point is they're a live record of what is actually happening and what you are doing within your business. And if you want to change that, or if another role wants to change that because they want to expect something different of a role that you hold, that can be done within the governance meeting. So it's a much more sort of live and organic way of working with a description of the purpose of the roles that you hold and what is expected of you.
Okay. And then back to your experience of it then. So working in evolving organizations, what were the challenge to you psychologically in taking that on?
I loved it. I have to say, for me, it was what convinced me that I wanted to become a Holacracy coach, and what convinced me that this was something that I felt a lot of organizations would benefit from. So I loved the clarity. That was incredible to me, and I loved the ability to get more clear, if I needed. So if a role that I was holding needed another role to do something, I could just go and ask them to do it, and maybe that would work, and maybe it wouldn't. So it's absolutely an option that you can just do that. But then as a sort of a backup to that, you've also got this governance meeting process whereby I could check on that role. Okay, is what I need from them listed as one of their accountabilities? Because if it is, I can expect them to do it. If it isn't, it's very much up to that person to look at the purpose of their role and make a decision as to whether it makes sense from their role, from their unique perspective within the organisation, for them to do it. And so what the governance meeting process does is it enables me an opportunity to say, I would like this accountability to be added onto this role because I want to be able to expect it. And that clarity for me was just incredible. The meeting processes as well, I don't know about you, but I've sat in too many ineffective meetings, like management meetings, right? Where I've come out more frustrated and confused and sort of overwhelmed or overloaded than when I've gone in. And decisions haven't been made, or decisions have been made without me feeling like I had an input or a voice. A world of problems, right, around meetings. And so to experience these they're very disciplined processes, the tactical and governance meetings. And that in itself can be uncomfortable. And I remember the first one or two that I ever experienced, and I was like, oh, well, this just feels awkward. I feel like the facilitator is being like a school teacher, and now I can talk, now I can't. It felt really sort of stayed, just not warm or engaging in any way. But as I got used to it, you understand what the process is. Oh, and then it's just like, yes, thank you. Thank you that like there is a meeting that I can step into, and I know that by the end of it, I'll have got what I need. I mean, brilliant, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the meeting processes were great for me as well.
I saw the quote in the book that said that one guy was reporting, having moved to Holacracy, that it done 33 agenda items in 55 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, we had an example at Evolving Organisation. We had a really, really challenging, what would ordinarily be called an HR issue. And we went in, we had a tactical meeting, and I don't know how long this meeting would have been if we didn't have the tactical meeting processes. It was not just sort of difficult from an HR perspective, but as often is the case with HR sort of issues, there's a lot of emotions involved as well. So, you know, you're dealing with sort of a tricky challenge, and all of the emotions that are layering in on that. I think that, you know, this meeting could have easily have lasted all day without the tactical meeting processes. And we used the tactical meeting, and I don't know, it was about an hour, something like that, maybe an hour 15, I don't remember exactly. But we were just dealing with one tension at a time. A tension being something that you need to get resolved, right? The actual definition of a tension is a gap between what is and what could be. And effectively what that means is, okay, I need something. I either need information, or I need to share something, or I need to get something resolved in order to feel more comfortable in my role, or more comfortable as a human being in this organisation. And we just went through it one tension at a time. And as we were getting through them, there was more that was surfacing. So, you know, more tensions were getting added. But when you handle a tension in a tactical meeting, you focus on the person that has the tension, and you ask them, what do you need? And you don't move on from that agenda item until that person has got what they need. And that's a triaging process. So that person might need a conversation with someone else, right? So you're not necessarily having the conversation there, but you're identifying this conversation is needed, and let's note that and acknowledge that this conversation is going to happen at a later date. So it's just identifying the next step to move you forward. And it was an extraordinary example of how the tactical meeting process is, like, first of all, save you hours and hours of time, but second of all, just amplify the efficacy of that meeting in terms of the people involved getting what they need.
Right. So just for people, it might be useful then to use that example to step people through then. So there's this HR issue, somebody has a need, it gets added to like an agenda. And
yeah.
So just talk people through it using that example, that might be useful.
Yeah, so the agenda gets built on the fly. So you don't set the agenda in advance. The idea being that whatever is a live tension in that moment gets dealt with. Like, we might create an agenda last week, or yesterday, a couple of days ago, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these are the things that need to be addressed in this meeting here and now. So we build the agenda at the start of the meeting. You start off with a check-in process, which, you know, if your listeners aren't familiar, I see this happening more and more often nowadays. Even if you're not practicing Holacracy, some organisations use the check-in, and it's just an opportunity. Everyone in the meeting space says whatever they need to say, just to kind of call out any distractions, share anything with the group, and just sort of get focused and get present for that meeting. So that happens one at a time. There's no crosstalk. You know, when you have your time to do your check-in, that is carved out space for you without receiving any judgment, any reaction, any input from anyone else in that room. So we do the check-in, and then there is a series of sort of 3 processes that's called the Preamble, and that's where any checklist metrics or project updates are shared with the group. And then we go into triage. So then the agenda is built. So if I had a need to share something with the team about this HR issue, for example, I would put something on the agenda, and it would probably be something, you know, so going back to this particular challenge, my opening need would probably just to share something about what happened. And then as that process developed, because I would get what I need in terms of having the opportunity to share information with the rest of the team. And then, you know, someone else might have a need to share something from their perspective. and that would be their carved out time, right? So they don't have to interrupt or, you know, find a way of layering their opinion onto what I'm saying. I get space to say what I need to say, and when I've got what I need, the facilitator would move on to their agenda item, and that's their carved out space to say what they need to say.
Right.
And then off the back of that, you know, if you know, with this kind of HR challenge, it then might be, okay, I now I have a need to change something in our policies, you know, in the way things are done within the organisation off the back of this challenge. And each of those can be added to the agenda. And yeah, like I said, I'm asked at the start of each agenda item, what do I need? And we don't move on until I say, yeah, I've got what I need.
Okay. And see, that sounds almost like a contradiction then, that we could get through 33 agenda items in 55 minutes if we're exhaustively seeking to meet everybody's needs. So presumably this takes time to build up a facility and to get that level of efficacy, as you said.
Yeah, I mean, 33 agenda items in 55 minutes. I mean, there's examples of things happening a lot quicker than that even. So it depends on the slickness of the process. And bear in mind, like, what we're looking for, like, this is a triage, right? So we're looking for the next step of getting what you need. We're not necessarily... well, yeah, like my previous example, you know, I might need to have a conversation with another role about something, and we're not having that conversation in that meeting. We're identifying that I need a conversation, we're checking with the other role that they're happy with that too, and we're noting a next action to organise for either one of us to organise that conversation to happen. So it's identifying the next step to getting what I need.
Okay, and that's why it can move quite quickly.
It can move very quickly, yeah. An agenda item can be 30 seconds. It's, you know, something more complex might be 2 minutes. I would say if an agenda item is going on longer than 3 or 4 minutes, then you probably need to look at yeah, I'm opening a bit of a Pandora's box here, but, you know, the idea is that an agenda item probably wouldn't go on for that long because of this idea that we're triaging and identifying next steps.
Right. And I suppose and these long discussions within meetings where people kind of hog the stage almost, that can be why meetings can take like so long, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a process to get people very quickly to, okay, what's the next step?
Yeah, because the process is facilitated. So, you know, first of all, the process is predefined, so everyone knows exactly what the process is, but also the process is held by a facilitator. And the facilitator's job is not to support the people in the room. The facilitator's job is to support the process and make sure that the process is being adhered to. So, yeah, you know, your example of someone sort of hogging the space, or, you know, having the most dominant voice in the room and therefore being the one that speaks the most, that is far less likely to happen because someone else is able to put something onto the agenda, and the facilitator makes sure that they are the focus during their agenda item.
Mm. And I did one of your workshops where we simulated this. And what it felt to me like was very much like being in a sports game where you have like a referee, and the facilitator is more like a referee.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't care about my feelings, and they're not trying to help me get towards some outcome. Yeah. They're just like, no, these are the rules.
Yeah.
and I actually loved it. But other people, in fact, probably at least half of the people in that workshop were like, oh no, you know, this is weird. It feels very dehumanizing. Oh no, I don't think I'd want to do it. There was quite a negative reaction from probably at least half the participants, which I thought was interesting, was I actually found it just really fun.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice analogy. It is like having a referee. And, you know, if you imagine trying to play a sport without the rules and without a referee, then, you know, it would be chaos. Another analogy I do is, okay, imagine trying to get from A to B in your car without knowing that you have to follow the rules of the road. The rules of the road are there to get you from A to B smoothly. If we didn't have those rules whereby, you drive on this side and the person going that way drives on that, the other side, and, when there's this mark on the road, you have to stop. And, if there's lights, you have to do what they say, all that sort of stuff. If we didn't have any of that, trying to get anywhere would be complete chaos. Yeah. And in that situation, there isn't even a facilitator, right? That you just know that you have to follow. And okay, yeah, you might get a speeding ticket, or so there are checks and balances there. But fundamentally, everyone knows that these are the rules, and by and large, people follow them because they know that it's in their benefit.
And presumably that happens over time as people get better at knowing the rules. It requires less intervention from the ref.
Yeah. There's a story of a meeting process that I think Brian Robertson was watching, or something.
Brian Robertson's the founder of all.
He is, of Holacracy, and Holacracy One, which is the organisation in the States that sort of owns and licenses Holacracy. He shares a story of a facilitator just having to say nothing in the whole meeting because the process just flows and everyone understands it so well.
So back to this question of your experience of it. So were there any sort of frustrations or negative reactions you had as you adjusted?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, certainly the first couple of meetings felt quite awkward. I think probably the other challenge was just around, I guess the best way to describe it was just around the sort of the psychological shift of everyone adjusting to this new way of doing things within the organisation. So, for example, I held the role of lead link of one of our main circles. So circle being sort of team, basically, and lead link being one of the roles that sort of replaces the management function, except it's very definitely not a management role. And so I was in the lead link role, and it was sort of, obviously I was adjusting to what I can and can't do, because this isn't a management role, but it does have sort of a similar functionality to a certain extent. So I was adjusting to that, but also the other role holders within that circle team also had to adjust. And, some people carry, their previous experiences, good or bad, of working with a manager. You carry those sorts of experiences with you, right? And so, adapting to working with a lead link instead of working with a manager was one of the challenging aspects. So, everyone getting used to what are the boundaries of this new role that's called lead link, and how does it differ from being a manager? And that's why, at the start, the sort of the biggest, chunkiest thing that an organisation needs to know before entertaining self-management or holacracy is the mindset shifts and the learning curve, and that can be really bumpy, right? Learning, remember when you got into the car for the first time with your first ever driving lesson, you know what it's like to be in a car, and being in a car has always felt just really smooth and easy. But now you're behind the wheel and you've got control of everything. Gosh, like that's a big learning curve. And I suppose it's quite similar in a shift to self-management. It can feel really clunky and bumpy at the start.
And is there a specific moment you can think of as lead link where you were like, this feels weird, or you felt uncomfortable?
I do remember something, and I remember sort of writing a post. We used Yammer at the time as our sort of team communication, and I remember writing quite a long post on there around transparency and what I see as my role as lead link and how that differs to being a manager, and how, as a lead link, my expectation is that everyone fully steps into their duty to process tensions. Because like one of the differences between a manager and a lead link is that the manager can often be expected to be a bit of a superhero within the team and sort of solve other people's problems, take on some of the meatier challenges and sort of fix them on behalf of the team. And that is very much not a lead link accountability. Everyone within a holacracy organisation, and it's actually written in the constitution, everyone has a duty to process their own tensions. So I remember writing this post just saying, these are my tensions, and this is how I'm resolving these tensions, and I'm encouraging you all to step into your roles and your duty to process tensions, because I wasn't a manager, right? That wasn't my role, and I wasn't going to be that sort of superhero, fixing things. My expectation is that everyone steps up,
right,
to their sort of responsibilities.
And was that born of a frustration? Were you sensing people not bringing tensions to the meetings? Is that a sort of way of shirking in holacracy?
Well, I mean, I guess I must have done it for that. I mean, we're talking like maybe sort of 3.5-4 years ago now. And I can't remember exactly what triggered it, but I do remember writing this post, and I guess I must have had some kind of tension around wanting to make it clear that I wasn't going to step into the normal management, a manager expectations. And I wanted to use whatever the situation was, I wanted to use it as an opportunity to define, to define roles and to bring clarity and transparency to what was happening.
Mm. It reminds me of something I read in the book about what. See, I mean, I'm not super familiar with it, but there's a secretary role, is there, within a circle? Or
yeah.
And the example was of this secretary who had the authority to choose when the regular meetings happen, and she brought as attention to the meeting, should it be every month, or a proposal to the meeting. The proposal was, let's do this every other Monday, and the facilitator was like, you don't have to bring that proposal, like you've got the accountability to just choose. And if somebody's got a tension about it, they can bring the tension. But in the first instance, it's written in your role, you could just do it. And that was something that this person found difficult to own, right? To take, actually to assume authority. Yeah,
that can be one of the challenges for sure. And I don't know how familiar you are with spiral dynamics, but I've seen cases of organizations that fall quite heavily into the green category, that is quite sort of consensus. It's very people orientated, and decisions tend to be quite consensus driven, and that's often the reason why sort of organizations that find themselves in this green phase, why they turn to holacracy, because consensus decision making, that there's nothing that's going to slow you down more in an organization than consensus decision making, especially as you grow, which many organizations want to do. And so that can be one of the most challenging things, is sort of understanding, okay, we've got this process in place, but adjusting to the fact that I or another role might have sole accountability to make this one decision, and people just aren't used to that. They are more used to being able to socialize their viewpoints and get the viewpoints of others, and have a desire to kind of keep everyone happy and incorporate everyone's ideas and viewpoints into this decision. But like I said, nothing's going to slow you down more. And And yeah, I think organizations that come to Holacracy from that sort of green spiral dynamics phase can struggle with that particularly. And coming to Holacracy, if you're more of an orange organization, has its own unique challenges too. But yeah,
what's orange
that's
for people
certainly,
who aren't familiar?
well, orange is the more, I suppose, slightly more individualistic phase. Being very sort of status driven. It's all about sort of success. Whereas the green is much more of a community-based phase. The book, I mean, Reinventing Organizations is by Frederick Laloux, references this idea that is based on spiral dynamics. So, Reinventing Organizations or Spiral Dynamics is the go-to place to read up more about these different phases and what they mean.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that I think is perhaps useful to understand as well, which sort of tips into a theme that we've had on the show a lot from people who talk about, as well as this facilitated process, which is very much about adhering to the process, not about looking after people, is this idea of visual management, right? That's also part of the meetings piece. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I was listening to one of your previous episodes and they were referencing this sort of these visual aids a lot. And I mean, I suppose Holacracy's version is of that sort of visualization of everything, the governance, the rules, the roles of the business. They all appear in a piece of software. So they don't have to appear in a piece of software, but they need to be recorded and they need to be transparent. And nowadays, the best way of doing that is with a piece of software. So Holacracy One created their own version of this, which is called Glass Frog. There are others on the market like Holospirit. And basically what that does, it's a piece of software where you can record all of the roles, the circles, all of the accountabilities, any policies, all of the purposes, like the purpose of the organization as a whole, the purpose of each individual role. And also it can be a place where data can be really transparent as well. So, I mentioned in the tactical meeting, there's this preamble where you go through key pieces of data that the whole team need to know about. That can be reached via a link in Glassfrog to the relevant spreadsheet or whatever it is for your business. And so you have this piece of software with first of all, everything is transparent, and second of all, it's updated live. So when you step into a tactical or governance meeting, you open that meeting up on the software, and any changes that you make or any actions that are recorded out off the back of the tactical meeting are updated live within your organization's like governance records. So it does provide a visual. Obviously, you can then go a step further with that, which is probably outside of what Holacracy really has a voice on, by having stickies all over the wall and having different and new innovative ways to give peer-to-peer feedback or come with new ideas, or say what's cool or uncool, or what's working, what's not working in your organization. Like all of those things would be ways that you can make how your own business does things unique. So it's that's all about sort of the culture, the specific culture within your business. Right. Holacracy doesn't tell you how to do that.
Okay.
It doesn't have a voice on how you do those things. So there's loads of things that you can introduce culturally within your organization. But yeah, the one thing that Holacracy does say is that the governance records of your organization must be recorded and must be transparent.
Mm. And that was cited because I know that Medium, the blogging site, were using Holacracy, and then they said they'd dropped it, or at least I don't know what extent they dropped it. But they talked about codifying the governance as they went along as being problematic for them, right, as they were growing. What do you make of that?
Yeah, What do I make of that? I think one of the pieces of one of the criticisms of holacracy is that it can overshadow what you're actually doing within your business, and that's probably one of the criticisms that could potentially stand true. I think many of the criticisms come from a place of being misinformed or misunderstanding. But yeah, when I'm working with an organisation, I'm sort of eyes wide open to this as a potential challenge. My advice when it comes to governance records is that less is more. And I think, because like you said about the simulation in the workshop that you came to of the meeting process, you quite enjoyed it, and it was almost like a game, and it almost became quite fun. And I experienced that evolving organisation as well, and I could feel myself wanting to bring more and more proposals to the governance process, because you want to tweak things, and you want your governance records to reflect what's actually happening. And if you're not careful, that can become a full-time job.
Right.
And that's exactly what we don't want, right?
You disappear up your own proverbial documents in your governance rather than looking after customers, let's say, right?
That can happen. That can happen. And so like I said, that for me, the point of this is being eyes wide open to it. And I don't see holacracy as being the destination, for business management methodology. I see it as being a stepping stone. I think it has a lot of really powerful practices and lessons within it. And I also think that it's not necessarily suitable for some businesses, and that also that you might use holacracy for a little while and come out the other side of it. So yeah, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what's happening at Medium, but if they found it challenging to codify everything that was happening into governance, then I imagine they've come up with sort of a better, slicker system for them. I think that what holacracy does offer is a really sort of concrete entry point into self-management, and that might work fantastically for your organisation, and you might end up practicing holacracy for the next 10 years, or it might be that you just learn from what holacracy is pointing to and find your own better ways of doing things that suit your organisation more.
Yeah, it could be that. Although reading, I've not experienced the Medium culture, but one of the things they talked about was, well, they do need some bosses, right, to do the scaling. And is there a case? I don't know. Presumably that's sort of antithetical to the ethos, is to say, well, actually, sometimes we do just need somebody who's going to come in and tell people what to do. What do you say to that?
Well, I don't think holacracy is saying that you don't need it. It's not necessarily in holacracy's message to still have initiators of ideas or bosses to direct. One of the misconceptions about self-management is that there's no structure to it, and that's a misconception. There is a lot of structure, and you can still have people who take control of certain ideas or projects, or who initiate new innovations within an organization. And where I've come to with holacracy, I'm quite interested. Tom Nixon and what's the guy's name, Peter Koenig, is the initiator of some really interesting research around source. And I know Tom Nixon quite well, so
I'm trying to get him on the podcast.
He's my reference point, for this work. But it was Peter Koenig is the originator of the research, and so I kind of sort of bring my knowledge and understanding of source to how I sort of practice holacracy and self-management, and I just sort of use that to recognise the reality that there is always an initiator to a business or a project. And like I said, I don't think Holacracy necessarily says that there isn't, but I can also see that on face value, self-management might seem sort of structureless, bossless, so I sort of I like to think that I blend those two ideas in the way that I practice self-management and support organisations to implement it.
Right, but I see there's been two slightly different ideas, because I could see how having an initiator might be consistent with the Holacracy ethos, somebody making a proposal and moving things forward and driving things along through the meeting structures. But then the idea of having a boss who is, much more autocratic, perhaps doesn't respect role boundaries, is I suppose less respectful of people in a drive to get something done, and that there may be a view that says, well, that's a price worth paying to achieve something big and important in the world.
I think this might be connected to the evolutionary phase of the business, and Holacracy isn't Teal. So, Teal being this sort of, magical place that is sort of portrayed in Frederick Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations. From a spiral dynamics place, Teal is considered to be a second tier of evolution, whereby all of the phases before it are described as being first tier. And so there's this, there's quite a large community now that is kind of chasing or desiring to shift their organizations to Teal. My perspective on that is that that's not an outside job, that's an inside job, as in inside us as human beings. And I don't think you can sort of force an organization through the stages just because you want to take an organization to, you want your organization to be Teal. And my point is that Holacracy isn't Teal. You can operate using self-management at any sort of evolutionary phase of your business. And if introducing some kind of system of bosses who do control or make decisions, I don't know, Holacracy doesn't tell you that you shouldn't have a role that doesn't make decisions without the consideration of XYZ. I just think it's there's a lot of sort of very intricate considerations that are unique to each organization. And I don't think Holacracy is necessarily saying that any of that is right or wrong.
Okay, that's interesting. So it's you would see it more as, here's a set of processes you could choose to adopt or not, without it making a normative claim on how organizations should operate or how leaders should operate with them.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, Holacracy is subject to the influence of the culture of your organization. So, you can look at an organization that is very green, and how they use Holacracy might be very different to another more orange organization or a Teal organization. I think that's what I'm saying, and the point is that you can't force an organization to sort of shift into a new evolutionary phase. That's going to happen predominantly as a result of the work that the leader is doing, and how that influences the rest of the organization.
And for people not familiar, could you recap on Teal and what you mean? So we've been through orange and green for... for those?
Yeah, well, so orange and green, and there's a number of colours previous to that as well, and they're all considered first tier. And the point of that is that from a place of first tier, you often consider the other phase, a different phase, to be wrong, and yours to be right. And what happens when you shift to teal, which is considered second tier, is that you are much more able to kind of pick and choose the phase, the evolutionary phase that you want to be most influenced by, depending on what is needed for that situation. And you hold a view that none are wrong, and that actually that all have their place within a certain balance. The challenge of these evolution phases, that if you get too much of any one of them, it can be damaging. So for example, in green, too much community focus in the context of a business, too much community focus, and your business sort of grinds to a halt because it really is fundamentally very difficult to make a decision, and that can prevent growth. It can prevent success within the business. So too much of any phase can be really damaging. And teal is a place, the theory says that you can't progress, you can't jump a phase, right? So you can't go straight from orange to teal, or you can't go straight from red to green. Like I'm talking traffic lights a little bit now. But the point is, so you can't skip a phase. You have to have experienced that phase to then be able to move on to the next. And the idea of teal is then that you can see the value in all, and you can sort of, I guess, play with all of the influences that each phase brings for the greater good, for the pursuit of purpose, rather than the pursuit of yourself, or the pursuit exclusively of a team. It's working towards, I guess, something bigger than you or those around you.
Okay. So that's the guiding light for teal, is purpose. Is that having a sense of purpose?
I would say that's one of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Just immediately ask, okay, so what's post purpose? What, there must be.
Well, so in Frederick Laloux's book, he described this next phase as teal. When you actually dig into it a little bit more with spiral dynamics, there is 3 colours that are identified as being second tier: yellow, turquoise and coral. So people are starting to chart, okay, so what comes after purpose? What comes after teal? And I think to a certain extent turquoise, but coral most definitely is real uncharted territory, and and research is happening to look at what's next. But hold your horses, Richard, yeah, because the majority of us aren't even at teal yet. So what's beyond that, might be a few decades or a century or 2 down the line.
Okay. And back to holacracy, you're saying it. People may use it differently, or the extent to which they use it may change depending on the phase that they're in, according to
depending on the phase that they're in, depending on the culture of the organisation, and depending on to what extent they take holacracy as an invitation to self-develop, to do that introspective work. Right. Which from my perspective is crucially important.
And well, maybe we should come back to that. But because I think that's interesting in terms of your own work. But finally, just on the book, there was this idea that Brian cites, this paradox. Right? And I'll just read it here: when you have a system that distributes authority and honours the autonomy of all of its parts and players, you also get a system capable of acting more as a cohesive, integrated whole at the same time, which I think flows in the face of what a lot of people might intrinsically think about this self-management idea, that somehow the cohesion gets dissipated by distributing all of this authority, and it all becomes a bit of an amorphous mess. And actually you need this central power to to keep the whole, and to avoid entropy, right? So what's your take on that? I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's just something that we're not really used to. So, within the context of business, we're coming out of the industrial, we're long out of the industrial age, but, our organizations are still generally structured as they were to fit a sort of industrial age where there is one person in control, sort of commanding what gets done, how it gets done, when it gets done, etc. And that suited us, decades ago. And in an information age, that doesn't necessarily suit us anymore. That's not necessarily the best model. And, for whatever reason, I think businesses, there's a certain context of a business that makes it hard to sort of understand how that could be true, that with this increased autonomy and every role having full autonomy over their role, that there is more cohesion. We're just not used to that in the context of business, but actually we are used to it in other areas of life. It's just a question of seeing and understanding how a business could possibly function like this. And I probably shouldn't use this example, right? I'm not a biologist, okay? I'm not a scientist, but the analogy that I sometimes point to is the human body, and I might have got this from Brian actually. I think he might have referenced it in the book. That within our body, every cell has its purpose. And every cell knows exactly what its purpose is. And every cell can enact its purpose however it sees fit, with the overall intention to keep us alive. And there is no one function, there is no one entity within our bodies that controls all of that. There are so many things happening within our bodies simultaneously to keep us alive. If they all had to check in with one thing that said, yes, you can do that, or, no, don't do that yet, then we wouldn't survive. There's too much going on simultaneously for that to work. So there's a number of examples where, autonomy towards a shared goal does do exactly what Brian's saying there. I think that within business we're not used to that, because the current sort of hierarchical method has been around for so long. It's almost become our unconscious way of organizing within business. And I think what's happening now, and I see it year on year, I think the consciousness is growing around this. 4 or 5 years ago, even the hierarchy was even more of an unconscious way of doing things, and I certainly have evidence that increasingly we're becoming aware of the hierarchy, and the pros and cons, and aware of the fact that actually there's an alternative.
Right. Yeah. So it's part of the reason that we find that, or at least I find that difficult, maybe others do, is that it's so ingrained in us from the history of how we've organized. Well, I suppose you think about it, I mean, it's how we organized companies, it's how we organize families often, it's just a very familiar structure for us as groups of human beings, isn't it? But when I think about, even if you look at the huge companies today that are successful, like a Facebook or these companies with a high degree, I mean, obviously they're decentralized in many ways, but there's still a very powerful central core. What I see as happening is that actually we're starting to, this had me think that we're starting to see the limits of the effectiveness of central control, because if you look at Facebook and the challenges it now has in trying to manage bias and trying to keep cohesive in terms of the central mission of connecting people, but yet we've got these biases creeping in and these seemingly arbitrary decisions to to kick one person off the platform for doing this, but somebody seemed to do something very similar here and didn't get kicked off, and it's starting to feel a bit less cohesive as an entity. And I wonder what will happen as these sort of blockchain enabled social networks, which are far more decentralized, whether they will emerge as actually more cohesive, and actually better able to fulfill on a central mission, or fulfill on something that's meaningful to people because of the nature of how they're structured. That maybe we may start to see this being borne out in.
And there's two things really at play here for me, and one is our conscious evolution, which I think is really moving forward right now, and the other one is the influence of technology, and those two, and the progression of those two, to a certain extent, you could argue, go hand in hand. But we're going through such an incredible time of change that organisations are having to adapt. And it's because of this change that we are adapting, and it's interesting to sort of reference that kind of like social networking, and and the whole like blockchain, and how that is going to influence how our businesses organise, and how just organisations generally organise, because this could tip over into impacting politics, legal industry. Like I think we clearly don't know the full extent of where this is going.
Right. But yeah, that's a good point that you bring to it here, that these things emerge in concert. We're seeing this shift in technology and a move to peer-to-peer and decentralization at the technological level, and perhaps hand in hand we're going to see an evolution of organizational structure.
Yeah.
And in fact, we've already we've already seen this to some extent, like the open source victories, right, of Apache web server, right, which is totally decentralized, open source, displaced all the commercial offerings. Wikipedia displaced Encarta, right? So I think we've seen some examples of it, and I suspect we'll see more.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, before we wrap up, I thought, because you brought it up, and I know I've heard you mention this before as well, is that part of what we're thinking about here is these external structures and how we organize groups and so on, but you also bring it back to the individual and our agency in this shift. And so could you talk a bit more about your personal development, your journey?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been really interested in self-development. That's something, it's a practice that I made a real conscious step. It was probably about 12, 13 years ago now, to sort of, to really bring that into my life. And on a personal level, that made a huge difference to my life. And as a leader at Flight Centre, that had a huge influence on who I was as a leader and who I was as a human being. I think, part of my decision to leave Flight Centre when I did was because I wanted to make space to do a lot more self-development, and I wanted that to become even more of a central part of my life. It's had a huge impact, just bringing awareness to things that trigger me, things that are sort of a script, if you like, a background script of things that are influencing decisions that I make, or how I behave, how I interact with others. So it's probably as big a part of my life as it's ever been, to the extent that I then became certified with the Creative Consciousness Coaching Academy. What a mouthful that is. And very much sort of introducing that into my offering as a self-management coach as well, because I do see that reinventing organizations and the whole concept of Teal, I think it's really exciting. I think it's by and large been really positive for businesses, and the sort of the painting of a picture of what could be. But my concern and my ongoing concern is that is perceived to be an external thing. That if you do X, Y, Z, if you introduce ABC into your business, then you become Teal. And for me, it's just not. And what Spiral Dynamics very much points to, and I guess what I was doing with the work with creative consciousness is just really looking internally, and I think we're in an information age right now, and technology is taking us places that we could never imagine. But I think the most important thing about this time is what's happening for us with our own conscious awareness of who we are as human beings, and how our previous or not even previous, how our sort of mental models, values, etc., what problems they might be causing. If you look at global warming as an example, we need to start doing things differently, and the only ways that we can really find solutions to that is if we start thinking differently. We can't apply the same thinking and think that we're going to solve problems that were created by that same thinking. We have to shift our thinking in order to really move forward, and that for me is why this kind of inner work is so important, like as a leader and within businesses, and then also like globally as well. Right.
So then just to recap then, so for you it's about finding triggers, uncovering old scripts or scripts that run you, and those are my words. So what practices have you used to go to work on some of this?
Well, there's loads.
Or is there one that you found particularly?
I would say, so I think mindfulness is probably the most valuable practice that I've used. It sort of mindfulness seemed to have, because my podcast that you mentioned before was, the main inquiry of the podcast is, who do you truly want to be in the world? And mindfulness, without really intending this, mindfulness was just a thread that ran through every episode and every person that I spoke to. For me, what mindfulness does is that it enables me to kind of zoom out. I was going to say slow down, and that's the wrong way to say it. What mindfulness does for me is it enables me to zoom out and look at the world I guess with at a broader level than the eyes that I have. It enables me to I guess from that place of like zooming out, I'm better able to listen into the wisdom in my body. I think we're very sort of cognitively driven. We place a lot of value on our thoughts and our minds. But there's increasing scientific research to show that the power and the intelligence of our hearts and our guts as well. And so mindfulness is a way for me of sort of zooming out and I guess bringing into balance my mind and my thoughts, balancing that with with my heart and my gut instinct on things. And also providing space for me to notice, to notice patterns, to I could get really lost into this inquiry if I'm not careful. But yeah, just a way to sort of to zoom out and notice. I think that's what I want to say. Yeah, because it enables me to zoom out and notice a lot more. And from that place of noticing, my values have shifted to a certain extent. My behaviours have definitely shifted.
Like what? Yeah. So what? How have your values changed?
Well, I definitely recognise that I was in a very orange, the orange was my internal, my sort of most dominant internal phase through my flight centre career.
And remind people, what does that mean?
So orange is sort of relatively individualistic. It's the sort of, I guess, sort of a little bit capitalist sort of idea where you can set a goal, and you should be rewarded, or you are rewarded for success towards a specific goal. What's important to say around spiral dynamics is that none of these phases are right or wrong, and as you progress through each phase, you still contain that phase within you. So there might be a situation whereby that value set is actually the most useful and relevant for you.
Orange Sally comes to the fore.
Orange Sally might come to the fore, in the same way that green, on another day or in another situation, green might be the most. The way I see it nowadays is that they're all a little bit more blended, and that there's no one that's necessarily more dominant than the other, but they're sort of balanced in how I try and live my life, I guess. But I'm not I'm not the oracle here. I don't claim to be Gandhi. This isn't some holier than thou. I still have I'm still sort of pulled by different phases at different times.
But is it that your center of gravity has shifted a bit, would you say? Or?
Yeah, center of gravity is shifted. Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
And more towards, if you were more orange, where do you find yourself more now? It sounds strange, isn't it, for people listening?
I'd like to think that I incorporate a number of the phases. I definitely see how orange is an influencer in my life, and green is also an influencer in my life. And so I suppose a value, the sort of the value shift at the end of all this, like one of my values is abundance, and the idea that actually me having abundance in my life should not mean that there is not abundance in the lives of those around me. So that's an example of where the orange and green influences kind of work together and have sort of spat out for me this new value that I'm still playing with this, right? I'm still learning. I still do a lot of self-development practices, and I'm still integrating, and I'm sure, I've got no doubt that there's going to be loads more insights and lessons around this. But that's one of the ways is this value of abundance. And for me, there is as much orange as there is green significance to that value.
Okay, so there's the go-getter and the nurturer of community.
Yeah, it's sort of saying, well, why can there not be both? Why does me having abundance mean that anyone else shouldn't? And how can I influence abundance of others in my pursuit of abundance within myself?
Right. And that pursuit of abundance. So what does that? So just in terms of people making sense of this on a day-to-day like routine, what does that mean in concrete terms for you?
I don't know.
Do you do anything in pursuit?
No, I don't know. I don't know whether it has a sort of a daily. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's more just about having, holding that as a value that I want to sort of explore and consider. And I suppose to a certain extent this comes down to sort of thoughts and beliefs, right? I've done quite a lot of work on identifying my thoughts because thoughts aren't real, right? Like, I don't control my thoughts. Thoughts just happen. My mind generates thoughts, and I'm not in control of that, except that I can be. And that's one of the practices of mindfulness, is sort of looking at the thoughts that are generated not taking them as to be fact, and sort of playing with how you can control thoughts and ideas, and having that as a practice can really influence what you do and how you are, and the things that you sort of manifest and create in your life. So that would be a sort of a more day-to-day practice that I have, is one of noticing my thoughts, using mindfulness to kind of to zoom out, to come into my body, and then also playing with thoughts. So, you know, if I have a negative thought, like, you know, this project that I'm working on, it's not going well. It's you know, I think it's going to end up really badly, you know, for sure. You know, that's a thought. This is sort of imposter syndrome type stuff. Yeah, we all have at times these sort of thoughts and ideas, but they're not real. And so, you know, if I have a thought like that, is just sort of first of all noticing it, because if you don't notice it, you know, you could end up self-sabotaging, or, you know, that could end up coming true just because it's a thought that's running that you're not aware of, that is influencing your behavior. So the first thing is to notice, and then the next thing is to change it, and to just sort of consciously say, this project is going really well. This project is going to be an absolute success. Now, the reality is neither one is true. Like, both exist in the future and the future hasn't happened yet. So, you know, neither one is true, but the positive thought is certainly serves me better in terms of, you know, influencing my mood, my capacity. So, yeah, I don't know how that necessarily relates back to abundance, but I think that noticing and that comes from a practice of mindfulness. That's been probably the most positively influencing factor for me.
Yeah, that chimes with something. A coach I know, very good leadership coach, who she's actually a partner within First Human, who sponsors this podcast, but she talks about this idea of leadership as a creative act. And I think when she talks about that, she talks about this idea of what you think and what you declare as being an act of creation in within the context of leadership. And it sounds a bit like that's what you're saying here. It's like you could create a future where this project is successful, or you can create a future where this project is a failure. And it's like both can be true, and we can choose to create in the face of not knowing. Really. Yeah, for sure. I mean, creation is another level of this, and that sort of tips into like law of attraction type of stuff. I prefer to call it like law of resonance. And you know, the idea that you attract what you are. You know, you attract what you put out into the world. So, you know, yes, quite possibly, you know, by changing your thoughts, you are going to change the outcome of the project. But at the very least, you know, the more positive thought is going to serve you better in this moment. So regardless of whether you believe that, you know, by changing those thoughts, you're actually going to change the reality in the future. For me, that doesn't really matter. You know, what serves you in this moment is as important and as beneficial. And it reminds me a bit of Elon Musk, when he talks about, you know, my vision is to die on Mars, just not on impact. It's like that's in some senses is purely creative, isn't it? It's like, I'm just gonna throw this out here, and let's see where it to use your, you know, where it resonates, what that provokes in my world. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, there's a number of sort of practices that you can do around this, which largely, I mean, it's stuff that I sort of learned about for a number of years, but has been really kind of solidified through the courses that I've done at Creative Consciousness. And the power of the word, you know, making a speech act, you know, noticing the context that you've put onto something, and then consciously changing that context and seeing what happens as a result. This kind of stuff is invaluable for me, for my own self-development practices. And now, like I said, it also plays a big part of the insights coaching that I do with leaders.
Right. Okay. Well, I know I'm 2 minutes over your hard stop.
It's not good enough, Richard. Shocking.
So yeah, I'm very grateful for the time. It's been fantastic, but I wouldn't want to leave people without them knowing more about where they can find out more. So where's it best? Because we've touched on Teal, we've touched on Holacracy, we've touched on the creative consciousness. Where would you send people who want to know more?
Yeah, well, all of those things. I mean, all of those areas of sort of conscious evolution, spiral dynamics, Teal, Holacracy, self-management. I mean, are you looking for sort of
is there a particular link or link? Or maybe it's just...
There are some...
Go on.
There are some really cool resources online. I can send you a bunch if you want to, some links into the show notes, because we've covered off quite a vast range of subjects, and I don't think there is sort of one go-to place that I can point people to. But yeah, I can certainly send a number of kind of intro videos into each area that may well be useful.
And for you personally.
Yeah, for me personally, people can contact me directly. I'm at sallymccutchion.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. So people can reach out to me directly if they're interested. Okay.
And in 10 words before we close out, I know we're over, but I must ask you, what does being human mean to you?
Being human means... being human means being in a constant journey of self-development, learning and growth.
Awesome.
How many words in that do you count? I might have gone over.
It's good enough for me. Great. Okay. Thank you. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah. Thanks again. See you.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.